Hello there, I'm the student, and today I wanted to talk about why this 1.36 King of Kings patch is the best naval patch that EU4 ever had. It is even more efficient to use marines and sailors for your armies instead of regular infantry. And to show that off, I'm actually in this game again that I did already a video on the Pacific trade route with the United States, because who would be better to show a naval focused gameplay than the United States of America? And what I'm going to talk about is sailors. Now, first of all, the question would be, what do you need manpower for? And the answer is, of course, to win wars, to defeat rebels, to basically have a working force to run your country with, okay? And now, if I tell you that you could do the exact same thing with marines and sailors instead of a normal army and manpower, what would you say? Maybe you would say something like, oh yeah, but I have always such a few amount of sailors, I can't maintain a huge army with that. Or you would say, yeah, but marines take 10% more shock damage, they would lose me all battles. And I can guarantee you that both of these things are totally stupid. And I'm going to show you why exactly now, and I'm going to start with the sailors modifier and with national sailors basically that you can see over here. Now, first of all, you can see that sailors are of course a resource that comes from coastal provinces only. You can see this province over here has 2,300 sailors, while this inland provinces has 0 sailors, okay? Now, most of you probably know that manpower is gained from developing the manpower pool over here, the manpower development, okay? You see, each time I click that button over here to increase the manpower development, I get another 275 manpower on top, you know? And then, of course, it's multiplied with my national bonuses and all that stuff. But what most people don't know is that base sailors are not just gained from the Diplo development. If you exploit Diplo development, then you get sailors, yes, instead of manpower over here. But the development is a completely different thing. You can see down there on the in the middle of the modifiers, it says sailors increase plus 60 if I develop this province once in the Diplo development. But now you can have a look on the military one, and you will see that it says sailors increase plus 60 on the military development as well. And now if we get to the administrative development, you can see that it literally says 60 sailors increase on the admin development as well, which means that a 3-deft coastal province has a base of 250 manpower from that one development, of course, but it also has a base of 180 sailors, okay? Nothing else, you know, just because of those other two developments also counting towards the base of sailors. And the difference between 180 and 250 is not that far away, if you think about that. And now it gets really interesting, of course, if you go to bigger, higher depth coastal provinces, such as Bordeaux, for example. And you'll notice that most provinces will have more development in admin and Diplo than it has in Mill. Because, of course, the AI and you also, you can't just keep developing the military points. You will need to spend other points as well to keep progressing with the military points, okay? So you can see in this case, Bordeaux has 8 admin, 8 Diplo, and only 5 military development. And this results in Bordeaux having a base of 1,250 manpower, and a base of 1,260 sailors. Okay? If you would conquer Bordeaux over here, it would literally give you the same amount of sailors as it has for manpower. Because of that dynamic that I showed you a second, that actually sailors comes from every single development point. And that also means that if you, for example, in this province over here, you want to develop manpower, but you can't because you cannot develop more than 50% in one category, right? Then what you do is you start developing diplo points and then the mill points, and then it's grayed out again. You can't use more than 50% development on it. So you dev another diplo point at another mill point, okay? What that means is for one manpower development, you usually need 2 development clicks. Which means if you do it in a coastal province, then you get 250 manpower for one manpower click, but you also get 120 sailors for both the manpower and the other dev click that you do to balance that. So then the question is, why not just use the sailors? The game actually gives you a chance to use your sailors very efficiently, actually to save manpower, if you will, or actually to run your army without huge amounts of manpower. And that way is through Marines. You see, I have right now a maximum of 602 Marine regiments that I can recruit, with a force limit of 550, okay? So I can recruit more Marines than my force limit is. And that is because I have stacked a lot of things to increase the Marines force limit allowed. Now, obviously, you don't need to go that far as I went in this case. So I, of course, formed the United States of America, which gives 50% in their traditions, which is a lot. But even without that 50%, I would have 60% with just maritime and naval ideas and a policy. I would already have 60% of my force limit that I could recruit Marines in, okay? Which means 60% of my force limit, I'm not even filling my entire force limit because I don't need it. Of course, it's a different thing in multiplayer a little bit, but I could literally run 60% of my army in Marines, and I don't even want to run 100% of my army because, of course, I need artillery as well to siege force, okay? So 60%, for example, would be way more than enough. But just to talk about the fact how easy it actually is to get that Marines force limit modifiers, there is a 50% bonus not only for the United States, but also if you form Australia or Great Britain, which are both formable nations. You can form them in every game if you want, of course, right? And then there is also a 25% bonus on Marines force limit if you form the Netherlands or England, or if you play Venice, which again, Netherlands and England are formable nations, okay? And then there are other ways to gain Marines force limit, for example, through missions. If you play Japan, China with the decree that they have, or in the Malaya region with Majapahit or Malacca or some nations like that, okay? So basically there are nations, and I'm talking formable nations around the entire globe that you can form that give you Marines force limit. And that's not even all. It is very easy to get Marines force limit from naval doctrines. There is an Iberian naval doctrine that gives that, a Basque naval doctrine, a Novgorodian naval doctrine, so a maritime Russia would be actually possible if you think about that. Of course, Norway, Sweden, Denmark would be possible, as well as Mamluks or Egypt, if you want so. So there are possibilities to gain Marines force limit in every corner of the world. And then there is, of course, the Tier 5 reform. Of course, I have a special one. I'm going to get to that a little later when I'm explaining what I did in this game over here. But there is of course this tier 5 reform that literally every nation can get, which gives 10% Marines force limit. And a few other things that I'm going to talk about in a second as well. And then there is also a tier 2 reform for theocracies that gives that. And then of course there are the Marines force limits from maritime ideas that every nation can take, and naval ideas that every nation can take, and policies that every nation can get. So it is super, super easy in this patch. There are so many modifiers to get Marines force limit. Now that I was talking about Sailor's base and Marines force limit, I only have to tell you one more thing to get you on board, which is the National Sailors percentile modifiers. You see, there are only a few modifiers that are really big for national manpower. Of course, a lot of nations have like 25% increase or 10% increase, and Russia has like 33% increase, as well as quantity ideas, of course, has 33% increase. But this is nothing towards the maritime idea. You can see maritime idea gives literally 75% national sailors modifier. And on the base idea group, it's actually 50%. I'm going to get to that in a second. But already 50% is a modifier that you would never ever get for manpower. But you get it for sailors, okay? And that is not all. Every single of those fish provinces in the world that you can see over here, which is, by the way, always a coastal province, every single of those provinces gets 25% local sailors increase. And then you get 25% national sailors increase if you have trading in fish, which is a very unique thing because there is literally no trade good in the game that gives the same bonus for manpower. Okay, and now comes a totally broken thing that I have to talk about just because it's so damn broken. You can see I am the Naval Hegemon, okay? And you can see those modifiers on 100% that the Naval Hegemony gets. The Naval Hegemony gets not 50%, not 100%, but 200% National Sailors modifier. Okay? And not only that, the Naval Hegemony is also by far the easiest one to obtain on the 3 hegemonies, because the only thing you need for that is 500 ships. And 500 ships is way easier to maintain than 1,000 troops or 1,000 ducats. Okay? Especially if you have maritime idea, which literally gives 50% naval force limit. And on top of that, the naval hegemony is the only hegemony in the entire game that gives a military quality modifier, because it gives artillery damage from back row plus 20%, which is an extremely unique and an extremely strong modifier the later you get into the game. And you can see that even the military hegemony gives only movement speed, unrest, and siege ability, which is nothing for quality of your army. Of course, it helps you win wars, for sure, but it's not for the quality. Which means that the only thing you need to do to get an insane 500,000 maximum of sailors, as I did, for example, in my case, the only thing you need to do for that is you need to focus on coastal provinces, which means you would want to first of all full core coastal provinces before you get to full core inland provinces. You want to focus on accepting cultures more on the coastal provinces rather than on the inland provinces, because keep in mind, coastal provinces give sailors and manpower, okay? And then if you want to develop provinces, just develop provinces on the coastline instead of provinces on the inland. And I don't know if you'd notice, but there are a lot of coastal provinces in this game, okay? There are a lot of coastal provinces. Every nation that gets a little bigger than like Bavaria or something will get coastal provinces eventually and will get a lot of them eventually. And if you want to go for the economic hegemony or something, what do you conquer? You conquer India. What does India consist of? Mostly coastal provinces. And by the way, India is a pretty good example because all of you know that the coastal provinces are in basically in every case the more developed provinces. Same goes for India. The biggest development is in those coastal provinces. And that basically counts for literally almost every region in the entire world. And now comes the reason why exactly this patch is such an insanely strong naval patch. And the reason for that is modifiers that overlap, which is the modifier for national sailors and the modifier for Marines force limit. You can see the United States ideas have plus 50% Marines force limit in their traditions. Okay, you can see the symbol over here. It's like a Marines force limit symbol. But if you hover over that, you can see that there is also a plus 50% national sailors modifier, which is already totally broken, okay? But I have to tell you right now, this is not intended to be that way, okay? It is not really an exploit because you are not doing it. You are not doing it on purpose, you know, it's just there in the game right now. You can't do anything about it. If you have that idea, you will get National Sailors and National Marines Force Limit modifier, both 50%. But as I said, it is clearly not intended to be that way because you can see in the game files that it should be only 50% Marines Force Limit. But for some weird reason, the game in this current patch actually takes every single Marines Force Limit modifier and converts it into Marines Force Limit and Sailors modifier. Okay, so this 50% Marines Force Limit is also 50% Sailors. This 25% Marines Force Limit on this Maritime Idea Group is also plus 25% National Sailors modifier, which is why together with the 50% intended that it should give, this says 75% now. Same goes for naval ideas. Normally, shouldn't give any national sailors modifier, but as it has 25% Marines force limit, it also gets plus 25 national sailors modifier. And this counts literally for every Marines force limit modifier that you can get in the game. Mission rewards, reform modifiers, national ideas, idea groups, policies, everything. You can see that also on the Recruitment Act over here, which should give 25% National Sailors modifier and 10% Marines force limit. But instead it gives 35% National Sailors modifier because the 10% from the Marines force limit is also added towards the Sailors modifier. And this means that I have in this case an insane 460% National Sailors modifier increase on my base sailors, okay? Every dev click that I right now do for sailors, for 60 sailors base, is actually 330 sailors worth. Which means that right now, if I dev click one click in mill over here, I will get, as I have very low amounts of national manpower modifiers, I would right now get, if I develop that, 35% more sailors than manpower from developing manpower. This is totally broken, okay? I have to talk about the quality of the Marines troops still because This is, of course, another thing that is important. Normally, Marines take 10% more shock damage. You see, 10% more shock damage is basically nothing, okay? Is especially the further you go into the game, fire damage gets more important. 10% shock damage is literally nothing, okay? So don't think that this is like a huge deal or something, especially as there is, of course, the generic government reform on tier 5 that gives regiment manpower usage for Marines minus 25%. And as it is for the usage of your Marines and sailors, it is actually applied after all the modifiers for national sailors. So it is not 20% more of the base sailors that I have, you know, the base sailors that I would have before applying all the modifiers. No, it is 20% less use after you have like 500,000 sailors or something, okay? So if I wouldn't have this special one, which comes from forming England before, by the way, this would literally make my Marines so much more efficient in use for battle than manpower troops, even if they didn't had any quality bonuses at all. But as I started this game as Portugal and formed England before I formed the United States, you can see that my Marines have literally plus 10% discipline modifier and no penalty because there is a modifier that is called Royal Marines from the English mission tree that gives them minus 10% shock damage received, so balancing the penalty out, as well as 5% discipline. And the same discipline modifier is also there in the Portuguese missions. And then you can see that, of course, the normal bonuses also apply, which means that Marines will not take a single crossing penalty. And they have 200% disembarkment speed, as well as they are not losing any troops while being transported or actually stationed on ships on the high seas. Okay? Now, of course, as you can see already, I have combined that with artillery because otherwise it takes ages to siege force, of course. But there is also a special modifier that if you're using at least a few, I think it's like 30% or something, Marines in your army, they are taking halved crossing penalties, okay? Which means that this army, even though it will take a -1 crossing penalty via crossing a river, for example, it won't take a -2 crossing penalty, for example, from crossing a strait. Instead, it will only take a -1 penalty. And same also for landing. It will take only a -1 landing penalty, which makes those Marines right now, even without the 10% discipline, better than normal manpower troops. And with that 10% discipline, they are just so much better. I can't even tell you how much better they are, because it is like they have 10% more discipline, no crossing penalty, more manpower, less manpower usage, no manpower usage on seas. I don't know how much I need to say to convince you that Marines are actually better than normal manpower troops. And just before I end this video, one more thing that I have to tell you. If you have a look on this huge map of the world, what can you see that is the biggest terrain that is, of course, used on this map? And you know, just like in real life, it is, of course, the oceans. You know, there are so many ocean provinces, and the ocean provinces are, of course, so big and take so long to travel through that your navy is actually very important if you want to conquer anything outside of your subcontinent, except if you play like a horde nation, okay? Yes, if you play a horde nation, then Marines are not better than manpower troops, okay? But in basically every other case, they are better, okay? If you play in India, you will have a lot of coast, it is worth it. If you play in China, you will have a lot of coast, it is worth it. If you play in Germany, you will be able to conquer the English Channel, Lübeck, the Eastern Baltic Sea, and so on. You will have a lot of coastal provinces, and it will be worth it. Let alone because of the fact that you don't need to rely only on Marines. I never said that you need to rely only on Marines, as I did in this campaign, because it's of course a little bit overstacked on modifiers. But just if you have like a few Marines, just if you have 20% of your army as Marines, for example, it will save you enormous amounts of manpower, because after all, this sailors pool is basically a second manpower pool, or in my case, the manpower pool is the second sailors pool, but you can save manpower with using sailors and win wars by just, don't care about attrition, don't care about how much you lose in battles against the Ottomans or something, because you have two manpower pools instead of the Ottomans, which will never use Marines and have only one. And that is the end of my little presentation, if you will. And I hope you enjoyed the facts that I presented you, because I can tell you, if you want to play a naval-focused game in EU4, then this is the perfect patch to do it. And I hope you will have fun with that. And as always, we are going to see on the next Monday. I promise the next video will be about a very naval unrelated topic.